Welcome to lesson 7.03 on carbohydrates and fats. So our essential question is, what are carbohydrates and fats and how are they formed? We want to be able to illustrate the formation of carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids, explain how sugars polymerize into starches, and distinguish the difference between fats, oils, and steroids. So the first thing we're going to talk about is carbohydrates. These are biochemicals. We'll also talk about fats, which are another biochemical today, and then we'll save proteins and nucleic acids for tomorrow. Those are the four major biochemicals. We are getting into what's called biochemistry. This is the study of chemistry, structure, function, and reactions related to processes within living things. So the things that we talk about in the next 2 days are actually involve your body and the processes that go on in your body every day. So let's start with carbohydrates and fats today. These are a main source of energy for people and animals. So we are going to be talking a lot about foods that you eat and how they're processed by your body. We will start out with carbohydrates. These are your sugars and your starches. Yesterday we talked about monomers and polymers. The monomer for a carbohydrate is called a monosaccharide. Mono means one, saccharide means sugar. So you're looking at one sugar. This is the most common sugar that your body uses, glucose. You can see it's composed of 6 carbons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's in a ring-like structure. It has an alcohol or hydroxyl group here, same thing here, 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 and here. Disaccharide would be if you take 2 glucose molecules and put them together. You can do this with any 2 monosaccharides. If you do specifically 2 glucoses, that makes maltose. And if you arrange a bunch of these monosaccharides, you get what's called a polysaccharide. That would be the polymer for carbohydrates. They're called polysaccharides. So just some terminology here. Here are 3 monosaccharides right here, glucose, galactose, and fructose. And you'll notice they are very similar to each other, but there are some slight differences. So glucose and galactose, they have 6 carbons, 5 of which are in the ring. If you'll notice fructose, it only has 4 carbons in the ring. 1, 2, 3, 4. They all have 6 carbons though. The other 2 are outside of the ring, here and here. So they all contain 6 carbons. You can see that in their formula. They actually all have the same formula. It's their structure that's slightly different. Glucose is the source of energy for all living things. It's metabolized during anaerobic respiration. You probably talked a little bit about that in biology. I'm not going to say too much because that's like a 20-minute lecture on its own. Galactose has the same chemical formula as glucose, but its structure is slightly different. Do you see where the difference is? So see how this hydroxide group is facing down in glucose? Well, it's facing up in galactose. And you might think to yourself, does that really matter? Same thing on this one, they're flipped. So you might be thinking, does this really matter? Well, yes, it actually does. It makes a big difference. This is what is found in milk. So galactose is found in milk. This is fructose right here. It has the same chemical formula as glucose and galactose, but a different structure. And fructose is the sugar that you find in most fruits. So what about high fructose corn syrup? You may have heard about that before. So high fructose corn syrup is kind of just a modification of cornstarch. Cornstarch is the sugar found in corn. And typically corn syrup is composed of only glucoses. So high fructose corn syrup, basically what they do, they chemically modify corn syrup so that it has fructose and glucose in it. So high fructose corn syrup actually has more fructose than normal corn syrup does. Normal corn syrup doesn't have any fructose at all. What does this mean for your body? Your body is really good at metabolizing glucose. It's not that good at metabolizing fructose. So your body doesn't really know how to metabolize this mixture of sugars. Your body has specific enzymes that can metabolize glucose, but it's not very good at metabolizing fructose. So does this have an effect on your body? Well, science really hasn't settled this issue yet. This is some things that we do know. So fructose only weakly curbs your appetite. Some of the fructose that's consumed ends up in the liver. Fructose that seeps into the liver may increase uric acid. They're not sure. Notice that may right there. That's a risk factor for kidney disease. So it can raise triglyceride levels. This is a risk factor for heart disease. It is more likely to take up residence as fat around the abdomen. It can also lead to insulin resistance. But with all of these being said, regular sugar is probably just as bad. It pretty much doesn't matter what kind of sugar you're eating. It's all bad for you if you're eating too much. So it's pretty clear right now scientifically that sugar is not good for you. You should definitely limit your amount of sugar as much as possible. What we don't know is whether high fructose corn syrup is any worse for you than regular sugar. And I was reading today, because I was looking at this link and it's from 2010, and it seems that it's pretty much the same results. They haven't really found anything too new. There's a lot of studies and a lot of them have mixed results, but they all do conclude that sugar in massive quantities is very bad for your body. Alright, so that's all I'll say about carbohydrates. The next thing I want to talk about are your fats and your oils. These have more complex structures than carbohydrates, so they're a lot more complex, especially in their simplistic form. They're also larger than carbohydrates, and they include triglycerides, phospholipids, and steroids. And they kind of look like the hungry caterpillar. So usually they'll have like, this looks like a phosphate head right here, and then they'll have these long hydrocarbon tails. Fats are another way that we store energy in our body as opposed to carbohydrates. They're more long-term storage. Carbohydrates are typically more short-term energy storage. You do get more energy from fat than you do from carbohydrates if you look at like the same amount of them. So triglycerides are the fats and oils that store energy in your body. Specifically, triglycerides are made up of 3 glycerol molecules, a glycerol molecule right here, this is glycerol, and 3 fatty acids right here. So fatty acids usually have a carbon double bonded to an oxygen, and then each of these little points is another carbon with all the hydrogens that it needs to satisfy the octet role. So here you would have 2 hydrogens, 2 hydrogens, 2 hydrogens, and over here on the end you'd have 3. So that's a triglyceride right here. Starts with the molecule glycerol, and you add the 3 fatty acids to it. And when you break this down, you release a lot of energy that your body can use. These fatty acid chains, so in the previous slide I talked about these fatty acid chains right here. They can be alkanes, alkenes, or alkynes. So they can be all single bonds, they can have double bonds, or they can have triple bonds, or a combination of all 3. The inclusion of these multiple bonds changes the biochemistry of the molecule in their body. And you might have heard of like saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, or polyunsaturated fat. So saturated fat has no double bonds. It's completely alkanes. It does have a double bond between the C and the O, but all of the carbon-hydrogen bonds are single bonds. Monounsaturated fat has 1 double bond in between the carbons. So somewhere, and it can be in a different place depending on what type of fat it is. So monounsaturated fat has 1 double bond. Polyunsaturated fat has multiple double bonds. So if we're looking here, these are all saturated fats. There's no double bonds. If they were unsaturated, monounsaturated would include 1 double bond. Polyunsaturated would include 2 or more. Monounsaturated fats, these are found in natural foods such as red meat, whole milk products, nuts, and high-fat fruits such as olives and avocados. And these are good for you. They protect against cardiovascular disease. Some unsaturated fats are also good for you, some are not. So some unsaturated fats, including the ones found in eggs, fish, seafood, and fish oil supplements, they promote heart and brain health. So it's not necessarily that they're like bad for you. You guys kind of have to just make good decisions. You kind of can tell if something's healthy or not. So anything that's like a whole food, like fruits, vegetables, anything like that, those are very healthy for you. Cheetos, not so much. So I think you guys have a good grasp of what's healthy and what's not healthy. Trans unsaturated fats are the ones that are not good for you though. So what does that mean? Well, if you look at like the two difference, this is a trans fat and this is a cis fat. This is found in olive oil. And if you look at this right here, if you look at the double bond, the two carbons that come next to like the carbons that are in the double bond are on the same side. That's what cis means. Cis means same. Here they're on opposite sides. So that's what a trans fat is. What they do, it is that the molecular shape around the double bond is very important because these molecules, the ones that are trans fats that are not good for you, they increase your LDL cholesterol. This can make your incidence of heart disease increase, and it also contributes to obesity. So these types of fats increase your risk for any kind of heart disease, and they also contribute to obesity. So not a good thing. So you want to try to avoid anything that's like partially hydrogenated. You can see right on the label whether it has trans fats or not. So like we used to think that fats were super unhealthy. We now know that's not the case. Fats can be good for you. It's those trans fats that are very, very bad for you. And you'll notice like some of your favorite foods might say, now trans fat free. So it's better to not even eat those trans fats. Our body doesn't process them in the right way, and they lead to heart disease and obesity. Another type of fat would be your phospholipids. These make up your cell membranes. You guys probably talked a lot about these in biology. They're composed of a phosphate head, and then they have a glycerol, and they have two fatty acid chains right here. So they call it like the lipid bilayer. They form in this two-layer pattern right here, and that's actually what makes up your cell membrane. Steroids are lipids as well. This is cholesterol. This is the base for most of the hormones in your body. Cortisol, this is what is released when you're stressed out. Considering that your semester midterms are coming up, you guys are probably releasing a lot of cortisol. It's very bad for you. It's not good to be stressed out. You can actually see if somebody's stressed out based on measuring their cortisol levels. And then estrogen and testosterone, these are the molecules that give, like estrogen gives you female characteristics, testosterone gives you male characteristics. And waxes are another example of a lipid. These are formed from the reaction of a long-chain fatty acid and alcohol in a condensation reaction. Remember those condensation reactions? You're joining monomers together and you're releasing a water molecule. They always have two oxygens in them and no other function.